So what we're saying is that not just inventions. The church is a supernatural entity. It was founded by Jesus Christ. Yes, it was not founded by human beings. Human beings control it, but it was founded. If it was founded by human beings, Mr. Yannick, the church would have collapsed long ago. The church was founded by Jesus Christ.
What if you turn hardship into grace, anger into serenity? Everything changes. Make your life a masterpiece. Welcome, I'm your host, Yannick, and now joining me, George Nchumbonga Lekelefac, to discuss his advocacy of his life. In other words, the topic, the advocacy of Nchumbonga George Lekelefac, an international advocate for the oppressed, voice of the voiceless, defender of fundamental human rights, canon lawyer, jurist, friend to the vulnerable, and lover of no oppressor tyrant. His motto is not merely to recount what has been, but to share in molding what should be. Professor Dr. Bernard von Law. Welcome back to the show, George. It's such an honor to have you finally back. And please, for our audience, just start with introducing yourself in one powerful sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Yannick Müller, for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to share with you my experiences of advocacy, which you just mentioned. So in a sentence, I would say I am the voice of the voiceless. I am the defender of the defenseless. I am a canon lawyer, a jurist, who is out to advocate for those who cannot speak and to defend their rights. To defend their rights. That's what I can say in a sentence.
Brilliant, George. Now, let's first really go to the topic. Given the fact your advocacy, okay? The advocacy of Nchumbonga George Lekelefac, okay? So first unpack what advocacy means to you and how it actually plays out in your life.
The word advocacy is simply to stand on, to speak on behalf of somebody, or to defend somebody. To advocate for somebody is always when somebody cannot speak for himself, and you need another person who is there to speak for you. That's primarily what advocacy is all about.
That's
Yes.
brilliant. Now let's unpack what you mean by the oppressed, okay? Because
Yes.
it can be even tricky, right? Because sometimes who is to say that the oppressed cannot speak for themselves? So let's unpack this, what you mean the oppressed, and why it is so dear to your heart, your work that you're doing, because you also have an institute really dedicated to the work, specifically to Bernard von Law's work that you pursue in the United States of America.
Now, you've mentioned an important name there, Benan Fonlong. He is the person that I'm trying to emulate, Bernard Fonlong, which you have interviewed me before about Fonlong. Who was Fonlong? Fonlong was an advocate too. He was an advocate for the oppressed. He spoke for the oppressed. He championed the respect for fundamental human rights. This was somebody who was a minister in Cameroon. But he did not just do what the other ministers were doing. He was there to advocate for justice, and the respect for human rights. Now, coming to your question about oppressed. Who is an oppressed? An oppressed is simply somebody who is suffering because of an oppressor. So they cannot be you cannot have somebody who is oppressed without an oppressor. So an oppressed person is somebody who is suffering. His fundamental human rights are being violated by the oppressor or the tyrant. That's exactly. So I am the voice of the oppressed. Now you ask, what do you mean by that? There are so many people, Mr. Frank. Oh, sorry, Mr. Yannick Mueller. There's so many people who have problems, but they don't know how to express it legally. They don't know how to write. They can't write a petition. So I am the voice of the voiceless. I write on their behalf. You must have read many articles I write. I don't just get up in the morning and just invent. No. When I get up in the morning, I receive messages from Africa, from Canada, from the United States, from all over the world. They send to me. They said, this is what I'm going through. I'm suffering. This man is doing this to me. And I write an article on behalf of that person. I write an article. For example, let me give you the clear example of the children of Father Cletus Tita. The children. Father Cletus Tita is a priest of the Archdiocese of Bamenda who has been accused of having fathered 5 children. He's a reverend father. Now, these children are the oppressed because they are not being taken care of by their father because he's a priest. He's been hidden under the canopy of a priest. He's a priest, so they are covering him up. And when I got all those reports from these children, I write an article, I write a petition. I've written petitions to the Vatican about it already. So I'm trying to defend these children and I'm trying to advocate for them because they are oppressed. They need a father. They need a father who is available for them. And when you are a priest, you cannot be available for your children. That's why the church says if you want to be a priest, you have to take the vow of celibacy. That is, you cannot get married. You cannot have children because you need to channel your attention to everybody. So the church says, if you want to be a priest, no children. But this priest, Father Cletus Tita, he has written to me and acknowledged that yes, he has 5 children. But going back to your question, the oppressed. The children are oppressed because they can't tell people that their father is a priest. It's shameful. Their identity is wiped out because they are afraid to tell people my father is a priest. The children feel so bad about it. And they have reported this priest to the Archbishop of Bamenda, Archbishop Andrew Kia, and the Archbishop has covered it up. So I, as the voice of the voiceless, I speak for these children who cannot speak.
That's brilliant. You are a wizard. You're all over the place and you write outstandingly. You speak fluently 8 languages. You're incredible when it comes to your skills, your analytical skills, but also writing skills, your communication skills. But my question is, how do you manage all the workload that you get? Because I can't imagine all the requests that you get. In other words, you can't speak for everyone, right? So how do you decide on what you will advocate and on what you can't at the moment?
The facts is what drives me to advocate. The facts. For example, the case of Father Cletus Tita, the facts are there. The names of the wives are there. The children are there. When somebody sends me an email or a text asking me to advocate for him, I try to read. I need to know the facts of the case. That is what makes me to advocate. I don't just get into all cases, Mr. Yannick. I get into cases that are facts. For example, the case of Mr. Emile Claude, who accused Father Gordian Baba. And look at this. Father Gordian Baba is still rector of St. John Paul II Major Seminary in Mamfe. He's still the rector after we've written a report against him because Mr. Emile Claude accused him of bad example of inappropriate relationship with the mother when he was still a seminarian, watching this thing in their house. So it affected his vocation. So when he went to the seminary, he said, if this is how priests behave, then I will never be a priest. And he kept it in his heart for 20 years. And then came out with this petition, which he wrote and which we sent to the Bishop of Kumbo, who is the Bishop of Faragojan Tata. No, Faragojan Baba. Why am I saying all this, Mr. Yannick? I'm saying that, back to your question, it depends on the facts of the case. There are so many cases I get every day, but I have to read through and ask questions and investigate and make sure I have facts. Because if I don't have facts, people will read and throw it away. That is why, Mr. Yannick, I call names. If you've read my articles, names are written. Mr. This did this on this day. The dates are there. You know, it's factual. Factual. We don't just invent cases.
I can also tell you are truly alive. You're so passionate whatever you do. I mean, that is truly someone who demonstrates engagement with all your heart, mind, and body. Really, it's amazing. So, just walk us a little bit through your childhood. Why do you think you have this passion, you have this engagement, and you have this incredible capacity to help people in such a powerful manner?
Mr. Yannick, that's why whenever I think of you, I am so grateful to have known you, Mr. Yannick, because it was in Ottawa, Canada, that the passion for advocacy began. It did not begin in my childhood. I was a quiet boy, went to primary school for 7 years, then went to secondary school, university, did my bachelor in theology in Rome. It was in Rome that a professor of canon law, Father Francesco Chichimara, he taught us canon law and he inspired me. He inspired me to study canon law. He told us, if you are a canon lawyer, you are out to advocate for people. In fact, he always came late to class and said, you know why I'm coming late? I was just in court to talk up to defend somebody. I was in the bishop's house to defend a priest. I was in the uh, religious community to defend a missionary priest who was being marginalized, you know. So that touched me a lot. That was in 2013 in Rome. So it touched me a lot. I finished my theology. Then when I moved to Canada, I wanted to study in Canada in order to have my documentation, and that is why I went to St. Paul University in Ottawa to do what? To specialize in canon law because of Father Francesco Chichimara. And when I came to Ottawa, Monsignor Rankin, who was a dean then, facilitated my admission because I came in with transcript from Rome. They were all in Italiano. You know, he was so happy to see a student from Rome because he had studied in Rome also. You know, so he facilitated my admission. And then the dean at the time was a lady, Asseline, Madame Asseline, Dr. Asseline. She was the dean, Anne Asseline. She was a lay lady. And remember the first day of the orientation in Ottawa, she told us, if you are here to study canon law because you want to lord it on others, because you want to bully others, please leave. Canon law is meant to defend. Canon law is meant to defend the rights of those whose rights have been marginalized. Canon law is meant for the salvation of souls. It's not meant to intimidate, to persecute. So that touched me so much, and that is why I spent 2 years in Ottawa. I specialized in canon law, and I graduated in 2015 with what? With a licentiate in canon law. I have my canon law. This is what we studied for 2 years. This is the book, Code of Canon Law. So what did I discover, Mr. Yannick? Sorry. During my studies of canon law, I discovered that there are so many rights of priests. So many rights. Priests have rights. But unfortunately, some bishops don't even know the rights of priests. That's why they violate the rights. For example, let me give you a clear example. Transfer. If you are a pastor, if you have been appointed a pastor of a parish, the bishop has to send you a letter of appointment and has to give you the duration. For example, Mr. Yannick Müller, you have been appointed pastor of St. Paul Parish in Ottawa. You are going to be pastor for 5 years. Okay? That is the letter the bishop is going to give you. It's an administrative act. Now, 2 days later, the bishop has issues with you. He has a problem with you, which has nothing to do even with the parish. He doesn't like you anymore. And then he changes and says, Yannick, I change you from there. Go to that other place. That is wrong canonically because you can't do that. You just can't change pastors like that. There must be a grave reason to transfer a pastor. But unfortunately, Yannick, in Africa, in the Archdiocese of Bamenda, it's not like that. Some priests have told me that they've never received a letter of appointment. The bishop just transfers them. He doesn't give them a letter. And if he doesn't like you, he transfers you and sends you to another parish without following due process, without a grave reason. So that is totally against the code of canon law. It's against the code of canon law. So as a canon lawyer, I advocate for this priest. I write a letter to the dicastery. In Rome, we have the dicastery for bishops, dicastery for priests. Different dicasteries. They are called dicasteries, which means a ministry. And they are cardinals who are in charge. So if there's something like that, I send a letter to this cardinal and report. This priest is accusing this bishop of having violated canon this. Now, in summary, you asked me a question on where did the advocacy start. The advocacy started in Rome, and then I came to Canada. It widened my horizon. When I studied in Canada, I learned a lot about the Catholic Church and the rights of lay people, the rights of, for example, as a lay person, Mr. Yannick, because I am not a priest, I'm a lay person. As a lay person, I have a right to suggest to the bishop. I have a right to suggest something to the bishop. It's there in the code of canon law. But back in Africa, some bishops don't even allow lay people to even speak. They are considered third-class citizens, but that is wrong. Lay people, the Pope, the bishop are all baptized, so they have the same dignity. The only difference lies in the function. But as far as our essence is concerned, we have a dignity. Everybody has to be respected.
How much is that a problem of simply not knowing the law of, for example,
Yeah,
the bishop, and how much
yeah.
is deliberate?
Now, not knowing the law is also terrible because the bishop is supposed to have a canon lawyer. Every diocese should have a chancellor who has studied canon law, you know. And the bishop should not do things without consulting the canon lawyer, because if he does that, he might make, if the bishop has not studied canon law. Unfortunately, many of our bishops have not studied canon law. Can you believe that, Mr. Yannick? They have not studied canon law. That's why they need a canon lawyer, a priest who has studied canon law, or a lay person to inquire from them. What do we do with this case? How do I proceed? But they don't do. Most of them don't do that. They just say, "I'm the bishop. I decide what to do with you." No, it's wrong. And then you talked about another one. You said deliberate. The second question was,
Yes, and sometimes you think it is deliberate that, as you said, they know
yes.
that they do something that they are not supposed to do according to the law.
Yes, sometimes it's deliberate. They just take the law into their hands. They take the laws into their hands. I am the bishop. You have to do what I ask you to do. They don't respect the code of canon law. And we come from a culture, Yannick, where authority, we fear authority a lot. We don't talk to authority. It's a culture we have to break, because that is why authority thinks they can do what they want. No, we must criticize authority when they do the wrong thing. We must criticize authority, because if we don't do that, they are going to take the laws into their hands. And unfortunately, Mr. Yannick, that is where we are in the Ecclesiastical Province of Bamenda. The Archbishop of Bamenda is a canon lawyer. He has a PhD in canon law. But unfortunately, he doesn't follow the law. So I have to advocate for these people who are suffering.
This is brilliant. Now, I'm I'm asking myself, what can be done? So, how much is this a problem of the church? In that I mean the Catholic Church in general, or the church specifically in Cameroon, in this diocese that you're talking about?
Specifically in Cameroon, it's not a church in general. We can't generalize. It's a fallacy to generalize. I like to be very specific. Now, Mr. Yannick, all these priests from Bamenda Ecclesiastical Province who have been sent to Canada to work, to study, some have been sent to Rome to study, some have been sent to Spain. They are surprised at the way the bishop treats them. They are surprised the bishop in Canada treats them with respect. Now, I want to give you the case of Father Francis Nde. Francis Nde is a priest of Bamenda, of Kumbo diocese. He was sent to Ottawa to study. Do you believe the bishop did not give him even a dime? He was not sponsored. The bishop just said, go to Canada and study. He came to Canada. He didn't have a place to stay. He didn't have food to eat. It's difficult when you do that. You just send a priest to study without taking care of the priest. Now, what happens? He came to Canada. It wasn't easy. He had to struggle to work, to have a place to stay, you know. And then the problem, Yannick, is that this same bishop is calling this priest to send him money. They have the mentality that in Canada, there's money everywhere. you know. And when this priest tried to tell him, no, it's difficult here. It's not easy for me. I can't even study because I have to work to pay my rent and this. And what does the bishop do? Come back to Cameroon. Come back to Cameroon. I give you an ultimatum to come back to Cameroon. And what did the priest do? The priest said, no, I am a canon lawyer. I'm going to fight with you. I'm going to fight with you. And what did he do? He went to the university and reported the case. And the bishop had sent a letter to the university to say what? To say, please exmatriculate him. Exmatriculate the man. Let him not longer be a student of St. Paul. The university said, no, we don't do that in Canada. In Canada, the students have their rights also, and the bishop was disgraced. And that priest is still in Ottawa. The priest excardinated from Kumbo and is now a priest in Ottawa, serving in Ottawa. Why? Because in Ottawa, the bishop there respect him. You know, it's not like in Cameroon where they just treat them anyhow. They don't listen to them. So you ask the question, is it only in Cameroon or is general? We cannot generalize, Mr. Yannick. I'm talking about specific cases. In Bamenda Ecclesiastical Province is a big problem. I always speak about what I know and the cases I know. But I would like to tell you that there's a big difference. That's why, Mr. Yannick, when they come to Europe, to Canada, they don't want to go back. After their studies, they don't want to go back. You know why? Do you know why? Because they treat them better in Canada. The bishops respect them. During birthdays, the bishop calls them. The priest told me, George, do you know that all during my birthday, the bishop in Ottawa calls me to wish me a happy birthday? Huh? But in Cameroon, they don't even care about you. So that is the problem.
So, what needs to happen in order to improve those conditions in Cameroon? Because Africa is a very important place for the church and its presence, right? So, what needs
Yes.
to happen? Where do you think the church has to improve, whatever it is, to make sure that people want to go back ultimately?
Now, let us not generalize, Mr. Yannick. Let us not generalize Cameroon because we have bishops in Cameroon who are exemplary. For example, the Archbishop of Douala, the Bishop of Bafoussam. So we cannot say the whole of Cameroon. I'm talking about the
Absolutely.
ecclesiastical province of Bamenda, which has the diocese of Boya, Kumbo, Kumba, Mamfe, and Bamenda. What needs to happen? The Vatican needs to sanction these bishops. The Vatican has to sanction them because they are going against the law. The Vatican has to sanction them. And to tell you the truth, Yannick, I get totally frustrated when we report a case to the Vatican and the Vatican does not do anything about it. They just keep quiet. They just keep quiet. I don't know whether it's because somebody took the document and threw it in the trash can, or they just ignore it because it's serious. When we report to the Vatican has to act. They have to call the bishop to question. That is what needs to happen, Mr. Yannick. The Vatican has to penalize the bishops that violate the rights of priests. The Vatican has to punish them by either um, suspending them. They can lose the clerical state. We have had many bishops in Africa who have lost the clerical state. That is, they have lost, they can no longer govern a diocese. They have been stripped of their responsibility as bishop. We've had that in Africa. So that is what needs to happen. If
Why do you
bishops don't,
think? Why do you think there is a hesitation now? As you mentioned, right? You don't know if there's someone who just throws these letters out and
exactly,
destroys it, and the Vatican never ever really knows what's really going on, or
exactly,
if actually the Vatican says, okay, you know what, it's too much work for us. It also probably bad publicity, therefore we just ignore it. What do you think is more likely?
more likely to me is that when these documents get to the Vatican, there might be an official there who knows this bishop in question. Let me give you the example of the apostolic nuncio in Yaoundé, Jose Avelino Betancourt. Jose Avelino Betancourt was born in Portugal, but he moved to Ottawa. He was a priest of Ottawa. Now he is the papal representative in Cameroon. Eh? We have written so many petitions to him about priests, about bishops. He does not do anything about it. He covers it up. So that is why we no longer send him any petition. We send directly to the Vatican. And he knows that. Archbishop Jose Avelino Betancourt knows that. We no longer go through him. Because when you go through him, he doesn't channel it to the Vatican. He keeps it, he covers it up. Maybe because he knows the Archbishop of Bamenda, or he knows the bishop. So probably that is what is happening. They cover it up. He covers it up. So what needs to happen is that we need to report this nuncio to Rome, or we need to go to Rome personally and say, I sent this document some weeks ago, some months ago, nothing has been done about it. We need to follow up. So I don't want to say there's corruption, but there might be corruption. There might be an official in that office who has not done his work, who does not want to read it, and who has thrown it away, or because it is his friend who is being reported.
How much does it influence on who is the Pope? Does this change anything? Or is it
Yes.
the bureaucracy around it that makes it so difficult? What is it?
The first thing is the bureaucracy about it, which Pope Francis tried to break. Pope Francis did not like. You remember when he just became Pope? He said the Roman Curia was sick. He named all the diseases that the Roman Curia had. And one of it is this bureaucracy. You know, all this unnecessary bureaucracy and corruption in the Roman Curia. Pope Francis tried to dismantle this. You know, I want to give you the clear example of the Archbishop McCarrick. McCarrick was the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. He was accused of sexual abuse. He abused many seminarians. He started this thing in the 70s, but it was covered up, covered up. People reported to the Vatican. They covered it up because maybe those people knew McCarrick. McCarrick, from bishop, he became archbishop, he became cardinal. Can you believe that? This is somebody who has been abusing children for 30 good years, for many years, but somebody was covering it up until when Pope Benedict came in. And what happened? Pope Benedict, in fact, he lost the clerical state. He became a layperson. He was dismissed from the clerical state and sent to the monastery where he died. So the problem is the corruption, the cover up, and the bureaucracy that has to be dismantled. And Pope Francis struggled to do that. And now we have Pope Leo. We hope he's going to advocate for this cover up. The cover up should stop. When somebody reports a case in the Vatican, they should follow it up. because it's not good to cover things up. It does not help. It destroys the community, and people continue to suffer. The church is not a place for cover up. We should not cover up people and hide them in the church. If they do, no, sexual abuse of minor is a serious crime. It's not just a sin. It's a crime which can take you. It's a crime against justice. So the bishop should not cover the priest up when we report them. Look at the case of Father Cletus Tita. Nothing has been done. We have reported it to the nuncio. We have reported it to the Vatican. We are still waiting.
Now, how long are you supposed to wait? Because again, right, it's a big, complex, right, a huge organization, so it takes some time, right? So
It
how
takes some
long,
time.
how much time do you have to give? I think to be realistic, right? Because obviously it is a huge organization and
And there are
hugely
many
important,
people.
really, for the world, right? So,
Exactly.
so what is your thoughts on how long it ought to take?
Normally, I don't think it should take more than 2 weeks. At least an acknowledgement of receipt. If I send you a petition, Mr. Yannick, you are in the Vatican, you are working as the prefect of bishops, and I send you a petition against the bishop with all the facts. You need to at least acknowledge receipt. Thank you for having sent the petition. We are going to investigate. But they don't do that. They don't do that. They have not done that for any of my cases. They read it and keep it. Maybe they want to act when they think, and that's one of the problems we have to, the church has to. The Catholic Church is a mother, it's a mother and a teacher. So whenever one person is suffering in the family, the whole body is suffering, right? That's how it should be. So I can't really say the specific duration, but I think at least 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, they should respond. If they don't respond, then it's either they have received it and kept it, or something is going on. So we need to follow up. But they don't respond. That's the problem.
But it's also weird because of the fact that you have such a large network. You know so many people in the
So
Vatican,
many people.
outside of Vatican. So how come that you don't get at least an unofficial response? You know what I mean? Or what
Yes.
is it? What do you think is it? To me,
Now I want
because
to.
these are very professional people over there, obviously. So just to uh,
They are professional people. Um, I would like to say that I would like to tell you the option. The option that we have decided to do now is to go on social media. Because since they're not responding us, we put it on social media so that people know. And now you're telling me, yes, I'm such a popular person. Maybe they are reading these things and just skipping them. Yes, that's what I think. Because many people working in the Vatican have told me that, George, we have been reading you. We have been reading your articles about this person, about this person. They have it there, but they are just keeping them, piling them until one day when they're going to be sure. It's just going to happen one day, just like the case of Archbishop McCarrick, the case of the Archbishop of Washington. It was the same thing. No, the canon lawyers were writing and writing. They were just covering it up until one day it exploded and he was lane-sized. So I don't think they are ignoring me. They are reading and keeping them. And one day you're going to get the effects. It's going to happen one day. But I'm very patient. And I think, as you said, it's a universal church. The Catholic Church takes care of all the world. You can imagine all the whole world, all the countries have Catholics and they write to the Vatican. So maybe they have priorities. I believe they have priorities. They take the cases that are more urgent. So I don't want to believe that they just ignore and throw. No, they keep, they keep, they keep. And when the same person's name keeps coming up, then they say, look, there's something wrong here. Or for example, Mr. Yannick, take the example of the Archbishop of Bamenda that we have been writing about. So they have been reading and keeping and keeping. If tomorrow, for example, he wants to be made a cardinal, They're going to say, hey, hold on, hold on, hold on. We have been reading a lot about this man. This man does not respect his priest. This man is a bully. This man, is a politician, So those things I'm writing could help to disqualify him. Yes.
And what is also very important, I mean, you are acting in good faith, right? The only
Oh,
interest that
man.
you have at heart is the betterment of the church, that it really strives, right?
That is what I have at heart. I don't have any I have no enemies, and I have no enemies. I just advocate. I advocate for these people who are suffering. And I'm fearless, Mr. Yannick. I'm fearless. I'm not afraid to be killed because I am totally 100% into this advocacy. It's something dear to my heart, and I feel fulfilled. It's not easy to write and put on Facebook and put on social media. I have had a lot of enemies, but that does not distract me from my focus. My focus is advocacy. Things have to change. The bishops, they have to respect the rights. Everybody has rights. We have to respect them. Justice. I'm out for justice. And I'm also out to elucidate. Because that's one of my responsibilities, to explain to people. Explain. For example, I sent in an article yesterday. There's this priest, Father Paul Ajong, who has organized a fundraiser for a priest who had died. And another priest came up and said, what is he doing with all this money he wants to collect for a dead priest? So I had to write an article to elucidate, means to explain that what he's doing is good, because it's an advocacy that he's trying to do to prevent further death, because this priest died while he was crossing a river. So now he's trying to raise funds to do what? To prevent this from happening by providing life jackets and other things in that diocese. So I came out as an elucidator to elucidate, to explain why he's doing what he's doing. Mr. Yannick, I am very, very neutral. I don't have, how do you call it? I don't have favors. I don't favor this man, and no, no, no. I am there. If you do something wrong, whether you are my best friend, when it comes to advocacy, we call it black. Now, let me give you the case of Father Basil Sede, whom you know. Father Basil Sede, whom I introduced to you. You remember?
Exactly,
Dog, dog,
exactly. I
dog.
just had in, on, yeah.
Exactly. He is my very good friend. But then when he wanted to excardinate, that is, he did not want to continue in the diocese where he was in Boya. He wanted now to join the diocese of Riley, right? Now, the bishop said he should come back and spend 3 months before going. That happened. In fact, he was transferred, and all of a sudden, they saw him in Riley. So people were wondering, is he still under Boya Diocese, or is he under Riley, which is a diocese in America? I had to come out to explain. I said it is totally unjust for the Bishop of Boya to favor Father Basil because he's giving him more money than the other priests. Because the other priests, two of them who were suspended in Charlotte, they also want to excardinate. They don't want to go back to Boya. But the bishop did not do the same arrangement which he did for Father Basil. Why? Probably because Father Basil is giving him more money than the others. So I was totally disappointed with that. I said, no, the bishop cannot favor somebody because he gives him more money than the others. This is not correct. And that is why I wrote an article, not condemning Father Basil, but condemning the bishop for favoring Father Basil. And people were shocked. George, we just saw you with Father Basil in Charlotte the other day. You were eating with him and drinking red wine. How can you do that? And I said, advocacy. I'm out for justice. I'm out for the justice of these other priests who want to also do the same process, but they cannot, because the bishop thinks that they don't give him enough money as Father Basil does. That is wrong. That is called simony. When you begin to sell spiritual things for money, it's not correct. It's not correct. So I came out powerfully to oppose the Bishop of Boya, even though The person in question was my friend Basil said. That is advocacy, Mr. Yannick. You are going to have so many enemies, but no problem. As long as I'm out to do the just to advocate for justice, I'm happy. I'm a happy man, Mr. Yannick. Don't you, do you think I am a frustrated man? Because that's what some people say. He's frustrated. He has nothing to do. No, I have something to do. I am talking to you from my classroom. I'm a professor of French, huh? And Spanish. So I have a job. But after the job, I go to the library and people send me articles, people send me petitions, and I advocate for them. That is
It's
my
incredible.
personal time, Mr. Yannick, and I'm not paid for that. Nobody pays me, and I don't take any bribe.
It's incredible what you are and what you stand for, and just the light that comes out when you talk. I can really tell it's very powerful, and that's why I consider you such a great friend of mine, and I just love talking to you. Now, let's go a little bit into the church and its role in the world, because I'm curious, as you just said, right? You are someone who advocates for people, but you always look at justice. Justice is your guide, right? And also truth, okay? And so therefore my question is, what role does the church play in today's world when it comes to, let's say, conflicts all over the world? What do you consider is the best role that the church, or stand that the church can take when it comes to conflict and other challenging situations?
The question you have asked me, it seems you are a prophet, Mr. Yannick. You are a prophet. Because what you asked me is just an article I just sent in for publication yesterday. I sent it to Professor, His Imperial Majesty, Professor Fonkema Chankang the First. He's a professor in Wisconsin. He asked me the same question. George, could you write an article about the role of the church in conflict resolution? And I sent him 5,000 words yesterday. That article will be published in a book. Now, what is the role of the church? The church has played a special role when it comes to conflict resolution. Right far back from Pope Pius XII. Pope Pius XII advocated for Jews that were massacred. Jews. He advocated for them. You know, he hid them. He gave authorization for Jews to be hidden in monasteries, you know, during the Second World War. And then after him came Pope Leo, no, Pope John the 23rd, who wrote his encyclical Pacem in Terris, which means peace on earth. He intervened among different countries that were in conflict. Then Pope John Paul II, whom you know very well, Pope John Paul II, who brought down the wall, you know, the wall that was separating East and West Germany. Pope John Paul II intervened. Why? Because he was a Polish. He had suffered that communism. And it was thanks to Pope John Paul II that that war was broken. And after him came Pope Benedict XVI, and then we have Pope Francis, who intervened. Pope Francis has always intervened when there's conflict. Let me give you the clear example of the war in Ukraine. Do you know how many times Pope Francis has sent things to help the people who have died in Ukraine and those who have no place to stay, no food to eat? The case of the situation in Cameroon, in the Anglophone region, Pope Francis has written and has spoken, has intervened in the conflict going on there. And now we have Pope Leo. So the church has played a very special role in conflict resolution. And people have asked, why is the church concerned? In fact, the church is concerned because of the social teachings of the church. The church has social teachings. The first one of them, one of the elements of the social teachings of the church is the human dignity. Every human being has dignity. Do you know why? Because we are made in his image and likeness. God created us in his image and likeness. That's why every human being has to be respected. So the social teachings of the Catholic Church, the first element is human dignity. Once the human dignity of a person is being violated, Mr. Yannick, the church has to intervene. Some people say, why is the church political? No, 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 no. It's not about being political. It's about advocating for the human dignity. You know, the human dignity of those people who are suffering. The church must speak out. And Mr. Yannick, who is the church? That's a good question, right? Who is the church? Now, the head of the church is the Pope, right? He's the head of the Catholic Church. And then each country has bishops. So bishops have to advocate also. They have to follow, they have to come to the resolution. The church is a teacher and a mother and has to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. Who was Jesus Christ? He came to do what? To free, to set the captives free, to feed the hungry, to give water to the thirsty. You know, that is what the church has to do, to solve problems, to intervene for peace. But Mr. Yannick, do you think there can be peace without justice? It's not possible. Pope Paul VI, the great Pope, said no more war. It's enough with all this war, killing of people. He said no more. Pope Paul VI, yes, he declared no more war. And he said there can be no peace without justice. You cannot claim to be my friend, Mr. Yannick, when you are not just to me. You are not just to me. So how are we going to be at peace? So the church is out for justice and peace. The church
Brilliant.
must always speak out.
Now, let me put this way, and I think this
Yes,
is brilliant because the gospel is really the good news. It's
of
what
course.
really heals souls, what saves souls, right? And
Yes,
that's really the mission of the church, as you just were mentioning, really. And by that, obviously also canon law.
yes.
How should the church get involved when it comes to, for example, conflicts such as Ukraine Russia conflict?
Yes.
The stance, because the question is really the stance of the church, right? Should it be a mediator between the two parties, or should it take to some extent sides? What is the role in that regard? I think
The
what
church
you
should
just
never take
proposed,
sides.
that is by definition, that's the role. But then how ought the church go about, for example, in Ukraine, Russia?
The church goes about through dialogue, Mr. Yannick. Dialogue is the way to it is when you dialogue with two parties that you can come to a consensus, to a solution. And that is what the church does. The church does not take sides. No, the church stands in the middle and tries to dialogue. And that is what the church has been doing in Ukraine. The Pope has spoken to Mr. What's his name again? The president of Russia, Putin.
Putin?
The church has spoken to Putin. The church has spoken to the president of Ukraine. He has been to the Vatican now. Yes, he has been to the Vatican. The church, the Pope Leo, in fact, Pope Leo, the recent Pope, has called Putin. They have spoken on the phone. So that is the function of the church, to dialogue with these two parties so that they can solve the problem.
Are you sometimes frustrated because there are people who think they should take a more aggressive stand? In other words, they should actually pick sides, because that's also potentially a view that some people might argue. So I'm very curious because what you're basically proposing is precisely what Jesus Christ was all about. He was able to foster a common ground where people can start seeing each other again, as you said, dialoguing, right? And
Yes,
seeing the humanity in each other's eyes, right? But what's your response to people who might say, you know what, the church should be very clear, condemn one side and not the other?
the church, once the church dialogues with the two parties, Mr. Yannick, the church comes to a conclusion. You understand? So the church has come to a conclusion with the case of Russia. The church has condemned the killings of of the Russians trying to kill the Ukrainians. I remember, in fact, Pope Francis, I remember in the last audience, the last Christmas audience of 2024, December, Pope Francis, before beginning the meeting with the cardinals, the Christmas wishes, he said, some minutes ago, some children were killed in Ukraine, you know, by Russian soldiers, and he condemned it. You get it? So the church condemns. It's not as if it does not take side. But when I'm talking of taking side, I mean that the church says what you guys are doing is not correct, it's wrong. What you are doing is wrong. Please stop doing this. And that is what the church has done. The church takes sides following justice. You understand? The church says, Russia, you guys, why is it that you guys are not stopping the killing? After the dialogue, they still keep killing. So the church has no army, Mr. Yannick. The church has no army. They have Swiss guards. Have you been to the Vatican?
No, but it's on my list.
Good.
It's
When you go to the Vatican, you're going to see Swiss guards. And those Swiss guards are there to protect the Pope. You don't see them. You don't see them like it's not an army. It's not as if they go out with guns. No, no, no. They're just there to protect the Pope. Unfortunately, we don't have an army in the Catholic Church that would go to Yugoslavia and fight. The church uses its voice as the following the gospel of Jesus Christ, who came to preach peace and to promote justice. The church dialogues. You don't know how many dialogues has taken place between this war of Ukraine and Russia. A lot has taken place. But Russia keeps killing. So what can the church do? The church can only continue to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Yes,
now to remain balanced. Did it also condemn to some extent, for example, the European Union and also Ukraine for not finding an agreement in order for this conflict not to take place at all? Because there's also an argument that can be made for Russia because it sees its sovereignty violated by potentially expanding NATO, right? So
yeah,
where is there? Because as again, I'm like you, right? We have to always be balanced. We have to see both sides. Where is
exactly.
the church's point there?
Now, with regards to NATO, you remember the last conference they had was in Canada, in NATO. Yes, it was in Canada, in what's the name of the place? And we had all the presidents who are representatives of NATO there, right? And they discussed, and uh, I remember Putin was not there. Putin did not come. It seems he has been suspended from NATO, right? I
Yeah,
mean
we
Russia.
obviously he doesn't he's not part of, but I didn't want to go into that specifically, but I just want to make basically an example in terms of the church's role, right? Because it's a slippery slope, right? Because there is always some people who think like, well, the church should be with the oppressed, and in this regard, it should take potentially sides, right? And so that's kind of my question, right? And I think you answered it very carefully, that really the church is here to build common ground so that dialogue can really take place.
Exactly.
But
Take
it's not
place.
always easy, right? Because it's very
It's
very
not always easy.
fast. We take a side, right? And the people who really stay in the middle, they are also the ones who get most likely hit by a car, right? And to some extent that's also the the role of the church.
The church goal is to keep dialoguing and mediating to end the war, to speak to to speak, to exhort, the church does a lot, Mister. You don't know how many times the Pope has spoken with the ambassador of a country. For example, the case of Cameroon. Many times he called the ambassador of Cameroon regarding the war in the Anglophone region. So they keep speaking, no, and condemning. That's another important thing, Mr. Yannick. The church condemns the killings. and all that is happening in Ukraine. The church does not remain silent. It condemns and says, oh, last week this number of people were killed. We condemn it. You understand? The church does that. The church has to be the moral authority and the moral voice. If something is wrong, it is wrong, regardless of who did it. And that is the role of the church. And we see that in the Pope and in Pope Francis and in the former popes. They have always come out to condemn. For example, let me give you a clear example of immigration in the United States. You know, I don't know whether you know what is happening in the United States now. People being deported without any due process. Did you hear that? People being deported, just caught and deported without due process. What has the church done? Pope Francis wrote a letter to the bishops of the United States and told them, this is not correct. You guys have to do something about this. You guys have to do something about this. People cannot just be caught and deported without due process. You know, when I was hungry, you came to me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. Who was you? I was that person. That person. You know, it's there in the Bible now. We're talking about Matthew. So the church, in this concrete case of immigration in the United States, where people have been caught and deported without due process, the church has spoken out. And yesterday, during the conference of bishops of the United States, they came out with a powerful, special message, which I analyzed yesterday. I believe you received it. The special message about immigration and condemning the present administration for their reckless deportation of immigrants. You know, reckless. Not everybody is illegal. So when you are caught, due process, but that is not done. So the church has spoken out, and even Pope Leo has spoken out. I mean, Pope Leo is an American, and I don't think he's happy with what is happening.
How does the church's role change over the next couple of years, given its moral obligation and responsibility when it comes to society and also its development, such as AI and so on and so forth? What do you think is more and more? Do you think like the church's role will become more and more important in society, or will it actually decrease in importance given the developments, technological and scientific, that lay ahead?
The church's role, Mr. Yannick, is divine. The church is a spiritual entity, so it will never diminish. The role of the church will be there from time to time. It has been there for 2,000 years already, and it will continue. Do you know why? Because it's something, it's serious. It's the gospel of Jesus Christ who was born. Okay, he was born in Nazareth. Have you been to Israel to see where Jesus was born? Please make a trip, Yannick. Go to Jerusalem. Go to Jerusalem. Oh, you are going to see where he was buried, where he was crucified. If you go to Nazareth, you're going to see where he was born. It is factual. It happened. So the church is not just something that was invented. No, it is history. It is history. St. Peter died in the Vatican, and that's why you have the capital headquarters of the Catholic Church is there, because that's where he was beheaded. When you are going to go to the Vatican, you are going to see where he was buried in the St. Peter's Basilica. So what we're saying is that not just inventions. The church is a supernatural entity. It was founded by Jesus Christ. Yes, it was not founded by human beings. Human beings control it, but it was founded. If it was founded by human beings, Mr. Yannick, the church would have collapsed long ago. The church was founded by Jesus Christ. And it is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. That's why it is found everywhere. Catholic. Everywhere, Mr. Yannick, you go, you find a Catholic church. Why do you think so? It is one because of the faith in Jesus Christ. It is apostolic because of the teachings of the apostles. One, holy, and it is holy. Why is it holy? Because of Jesus Christ, because of the founder. So that is why No, the role of the Catholic Church will be forever and ever, in season and out of season, because the founder is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came to bring good news to the poor, to free the captives. That is why the Catholic Church has power, Mr. Yannick, everywhere in the world. When bishops speak, they listen because of apostolic succession. The bishops are the successors of the apostles who were there with Jesus. So it is a continuation, Mr. Yannick. Before Jesus Christ ascended to heaven, what did he do? He called the apostles and said, Peter, you are going to be my representative. St. Peter. And that is why you have the Pope, who is the representative, and you have the bishops. So it continues. This is history. This is history. And anybody who has gone to school, who has studied, reverse. Now, Mr. Yannick, why do you think presidents travel to the Vatican all the time? Why? Recently, the king of Britain, King Charles. Recently, why do you think King Charles went to the Vatican? Because they acknowledge the power that the Pope has. Presidents, every president wants to go to Rome to see the Pope. Why? Because the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church has authority because of his moral authority. Moral authority. Moral authority. I have a document here which I wanted to show you about the. 1 second. I want to show you this book I published. I have it right here of Britain. I have a special love for Britain. Now, this is a book I published about King Charles III. King Charles III. I wrote a book about King Charles on his 75th birthday. And then I wrote a book about Prince Catherine at 40, when she was 40 years old. Now, why am I showing you these two books? I'm just want to let you know that these are world powers, but they always go to the Vatican to pay homage. Queen Elizabeth, before she passed, she went to the Vatican most of the times to pay homage, because they acknowledge the fact that the Pope is a moral authority. When the Pope speaks, everybody listens. So the role has not decreased, and it will never decrease, because it is divine. The church was founded by Jesus Christ, who
Tell
is
us
the
a little
Son of
bit.
God.
Tell us a little bit, just that we get a nice overview of the difference between Benedict, Francis, and now Leo. According to you, what is the main differences between the three popes? And do you think these differences are actually important? And why? Explain.
Now, each Pope is a different person. You know that. For example, me and you and me, Mr. Yannick, are we the same? We are not the same, because we have different backgrounds. Two people cannot be the same. Even two identical twins cannot be the same. So people have to understand that. They have to understand that. So they should stop saying, oh, why is Pope Benedict different from Pope Francis and different from Leo? They are not the same. They are from different nationalities. Pope Benedict, whom I met Pope Benedict in Rome 2013 before he resigned. I was a student in Rome. Do you understand? And the first impression I had about the Pope was that he was not too close to the people. Because I was there, I tried to greet him, but he was far away. That is the experience I had with Pope Benedict XVI. He was a professor. Professor. They stand up there and teach, and you listen. And he was from Germany. Germans are generally not very warm people. No, Germans are very cold, and I'm not insulting them. I was in Germany for 5 years. I spent 5 years in Germany, and when I flew, Mr. Yannick, I finished my licensure in canon law in Canada, a country where I could enter the subway and say, "Comment ça va, mon ami? How are you?" That's how Canada is. When I entered the subway in Canada, I could greet people and talk to them. Eh? But when I went to Germany, what are you doing? I said, "Hello, warum lachst du? Warum lachst du immer? Why are you laughing?" always. You know, different culture, serious culture. You are not supposed to laugh. You're supposed to be serious. You know, oh man, I had a lot of problems in Germany because of this change in culture. So we cannot expect Pope Benedict, who was from Germany, to be like Pope Francis, who was from Argentina. When I went to Mexico, in 2009 to study Spanish. And when I went to Mexico, everybody was calling me hermano, 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 vente a comer, vente a comer. Come and eat with us. We invite you for supper. We invite you for lunch, even without knowing me. That is Mexico. That is the Latin American spirit. They are very warm people. So we cannot expect Pope Francis to be different. Now, my experience with Pope Francis, 2014, before I left Rome for Canada, we had a conference with Pope Francis in the Clementine Hall. Clementine Hall is inside the Vatican. All the students of theology. And I was there. He came right to me. I touched him. I said, "Hola, Papa." Papa. I called him Jorge because he's called Jorge. He's Pope Francis, but his baptism name is George. Do you understand? So I said, "I am called George like you in Spanish. Me llamo Jorge como tú." And he greeted me. I have the picture. And then he said, "De donde eres? Where are you from?" Because he saw a black man speaking Spanish. He said, "But de donde eres?" And I told him, I soy de Cameroon, pero estuve en México por 2 años. I am from Cameroon, but I was in Mexico for 2 years. That's why I can speak Spanish with you. And he said, Dios te bendiga, God bless you. But I touched him. You know, he was a different pope. He was a pope for the people because he's from Latin America. But in Germany, no, in Germany, you don't embrace people. Do you? No, you greet them like this. Hello, wie geht's dir?
Exactly. Swiss German, we do the same. We greet handshake.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Exactly. But in Latin America, no, you embrace. Mr. Yannick, when I went to Mexico to study, I was received in Jalapa, Veracruz by one of the persons they sent from the university to escort me to my apartment because I didn't know anybody in Mexico. I got a visa from Nigeria. I flew to Mexico City. They had told me how to arrive Jalapa. When I arrived Jalapa, this lady was there to wait for me to receive me. And guess what? She hugged me. Bienvenido, Jorge, which means George. That is the Latin American culture. It's embracing, it's touching, you know. That is the difference between Pope. I'm back to your question. That's the difference between Pope Benedict, who was a German, serious man, very serious. And people said he was very shy. Very shy. He could not look at you at the eyes like that for a long time because he was a professor. But Pope Francis was a pastor. He was not a professor. He was a pastor who had worked in the how do you call those places? Very very dirty places in Argentina. Who was out to help the poor. You know that's why he was different. This was a pope who was taking the subway. No, as Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he was taking the subway. Can you believe that? No, you cannot do that in Germany. In Germany, bishops have Mercedes Benz. I've never seen a bishop taking a subway in Germany. It's different. But Pope Francis was doing that because of his background. And then let's come now to Pope Leo, who is an American, but who lived in Peru for 20 years. Can you beat it? You see how different he is? He's not just an American, but he's a global, he's a, uh, he's an international man who has lived in Peru. He speaks Spanish perfectly, and then he left Chicago. You know, so he cannot be the same like Francis, and he cannot be the same like Pope Benedict because of their background, which is different. But what makes them common, Mr. Yannick? What makes them common is the gospel. The gospel is what is makes them brings them together. The gospel of Jesus Christ, loving one another, preaching peace and justice. All of them did that. But the difference, Mr. Yannick, is in their personality. One is a German, one is an Argentinian, and one is an American who lived in Peru for 20 years. So they are not the same.
And this is really, George, you are also an advocate of diversity, you know, and you are also really deeply in love with the United States of America. You love Canada, you love the United States of
I
America.
love
And
everywhere I've been to,
exactly.
everywhere.
And that's why you are a true advocate of humanity and really of diversity. And I think that is beautiful. And that's why I just love to talk to you, George. Thank you so much for your time, for your incredible nature. And I can't wait to have you back soon. Hopefully, this time we won't have to wait for 2 years plus.
No, we won't. We should talk more often, Mr. Yannick, more often, maybe once a month. Yes, let's do it once a month. And talking about what you just said of international figure, I would like to let you know that when I was a kid, there was my uncle who is now in the professor I told you, from Cam. In fact, I wrote a book about him. 750 pages about this man. This man was my uncle. When I was a kid, I was 10 years old, and I saw him interpret. He was speaking. It was the baptism of my siblings, the baptism ceremony, and it was an important ceremony, 1992. So he was called to come and be the interpreter because there were French people there. It was in Balmayo. So he was speaking people were speaking in English, and he was interpreting in what? In French. That thing touched me. That experience touched me as a kid. And I said, I am going to learn as many languages as possible. Because of that event, I admired him speaking in different languages. And that was why I went to Mexico, studied Spanish, went to Italy, Italian, Canada, did my master's in French, then Germany, 5 years. And while in Germany, I was going to Portugal to learn Spanish and Portuguese. And why did I do all that? Because I wanted to be able to communicate with everybody I meet, with anybody that I meet. Because my name, Nchumbonga, that name Nchumbonga means somebody who speaks well. That's what Nchumbonga means. So my name inspired me. And Mr. Yannick, it was not easy. It's not easy to learn a language. And Mr. Yannick, I didn't just learn the language, I immersed into the culture. So when I speak Spanish, I don't just speak Spanish of the university, but I speak like a Mexican because I integrated into the culture, not just the language. And that has helped me to be a different person. You know, each language I speak makes me a different person. Yeah, I'm speaking to you in English now. If I want to speak Spanish, I'm going to be different. And I like that because, oh, it has enriched my life. It has enriched my life. And I have been able to understand people better. Understand people. So, for example, Mr. Yannick, there was a person here who had a problem with a German, and he called me and said, what do I do with this person? I said, you know what? These are how Germans are, and this is what you should do. Why did I help the person? Because I have lived in Germany, and I know Germans. So it makes life easy for me, and it helps me to help people solve their problems. That gives me joy.
Thank you so much, George, for being truly a gift to myself and really to the world. George Nchumbonga Lekelefac. What a gift.
Lekelefac. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. And let's do this once a month. And it's also a pleasure, Yannick. It's always a pleasure to speak with you because whenever I think of you, I think of my experience in Ottawa. It is thanks to Ottawa that I'm an advocate. My 2 years in Ottawa, man, were 2 unforgettable years, and I'm happy I met you there, and I'm happy we are still in talk.
George Nchumbonga Lekelefac. That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.the-ykm.com. Meant to make you grow.